we have here in the United States, we've got clean water, we've got fresh food, basic sanitation, nice toilets. Like, I can't tell you how excited I was to sit on a real American toilet when I got back in the States. It sounds crazy, but the stuff that we were sitting in was like awful. And
flush.
And yeah, it didn't flush. Yeah, it was
It was a hole in the ground.
It basically was a hole in the ground with tons of flies and stench you would not believe. And we get to come back here with air conditioning and heating, which is nice now, the heating, the cold front. We also have TVs, computers, video games, smartphones, all this stuff. All of us have pretty much everything on this list. If we go to the next slide, I want to show a picture of a typical Honduran home. And what you'll see here is it's made of kind of a mud brick exterior. This was on the side of a mountain. You see it, brother? Okay. All right, it's frozen, so I'll just describe it to you. You saw the homes as Allison and Megan were talking. This is a place where there's no electricity, dirt floors, no heating, no air, nothing. The water they had, if they were wealthy, was polluted water from a stream where there's parasites. And so it was awful, a really bad place to be. This is a much more common setup, and here's a picture of the house, just kind of on the side of the mountain. This is a much more common setup than what we have. We are so amazingly privileged here in the States. Right before I left for Honduras, I was given just a little reminder, a little taste of this reality. On March 5th, I came home from work, and as I approached my apartment, I noticed the door was open. And I was really surprised. I was trying to think back, did I leave the door unlocked? If you ever had that feeling, it's a really bad feeling. And so I walked in, and I turned around, and if you could go to the next slide, this is what I saw. That was the place where I used to have my 60-inch LG plasma flat-screen TV that was my pride and joy. And so I turned around, it's gone. Wii gone, Xbox gone. I had 5 laptops that are all gone. Phone gone, Kindle gone. And the list, there's a long list of stuff. Thousands and thousands of dollars of stuff was taken from me in a short instant. And what's weird is that the quality of my life really didn't change much. The cool thing is that I have an amazing wife whom I love. She's back there. She's the cute one with the baby, in case you're wondering. And I love her. She's really smart and awesome to talk with. And losing the TV, losing the computer, just forced me to talk more to her. And so it was actually kind of cool. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually kind of I think I am actually glad that we were robbed, because it's opened my eyes to how fleeting stuff is. The stuff that we're surrounded by and so easily distracts us. I'm reminded of the reality that everything is secondary to following Christ. Everything. That's really the only thing that matters, is following Christ. And I'm glad, because this was a good reminder. Tonight we're gonna encounter a guy, a young man, who encountered Jesus. And he had the opportunity to follow him. And I think there's a whole lot that we can learn from this experience. Let's go ahead and check it out. Our story picks up in Mark chapter 10, verse 17. And so it'll flash up there on the screen. It says this: as Jesus was starting out on his way to Jerusalem, a man came running up to him. He knelt down and asked, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And just to give us a little background of what's happening right here, Jesus is on his final journey, the final leg of his journey into Jerusalem. This is pretty close to this time of year, a couple thousand years ago. And he's actually just outside Jerusalem on his way in, about to be crucified. In fact, he's talking to his disciples, telling them, "Hey, I'm going to die, I'm going to rise again in 3 days." As Jesus is walking along in this area, he's probably accompanied by a large crowd, because since he did miracles, spoke things people had never heard of, and made fun of religious people, people kind of flock to that. It's a spectacle. There's things going on. And so there's probably a crowd that's surrounding him as he's heading into Jerusalem. Remember his reception in Jerusalem was full of excitement, enthusiasm, and as everyone lays down their coats and their palm branches for him. And so he's on this trip. All of a sudden, a well-dressed man pops out of nowhere, runs in front of him, kneels down, and then asks him a question. And this is a good question. What must I do to inherit eternal life? It's pretty important. And I think it's probably actually the most important most important question we can ask. But he asks it in a wrong manner. And there's actually 2 things that are wrong with it, and Jesus, as he does often, addresses both things that are wrong. The first problem that Jesus exposes is found in verse 18. He says, "Why do you call me good?" Jesus asked. "Only God is truly good." See, Jesus knows everything. He knew what was coming out of the man's mouth didn't really match up with his heart. Jesus knows everything about my heart, your heart, and this man's heart. This guy, Jesus knew this guy did not see him as God. This man probably respected Jesus. He probably looked up to Jesus. He listened to him. He liked him. He even sought counsel from Jesus. But he only viewed Jesus as a good teacher. There's nothing more. There are a lot of good teachers out there. I want to show you one of my favorite good teachers who you might know at the next slide. So this is Shelley Drury. Does anyone know Shelley Drury? Yes, I love her. She taught me a lot about how much I didn't know. And as a senior in high school, I thought I knew a whole lot. If you guys are there, you can maybe identify with that. But here I was back in 1998 signing a letter of intent with the University of Kansas to swim for them. So yes, I'm really fired up about them being in the Sweet 16. But what Coach Drury did is she told me what I needed to hear. She humbled me. She was a good teacher. And she was usually right. In fact, she'd probably say she was always right. And she might have been. But if I disagreed with her, eternity wasn't at stake, right? If I didn't like what she had to say, I didn't have to do it. She might kick me off the swimming team, but other than that, there's not much she would do. She was a good teacher. We have good teachers in our lives. This man looked at Jesus like a good teacher. He respected him, and so on and so forth. Let's go to the next slide. Jesus is not a good teacher. He's God. Looking at Honduras, it was amazing to see the beauty out there. Just the way that those mountains would be, how green it was. Colors that you hardly even think might exist. You get to hear the birds in the air and smell the mountain breeze. Just gorgeous. It says in John chapter 1 that Jesus is the one that created all this. And so here's this man bowing before Jesus, thinking he's a good teacher, missing the fact that he's God. I think this man's a lot like people in our culture today. When you talk to people in society today, if you talk to your classmates, very few people hate Jesus, right? They say, yeah, Jesus is good. I like what he had to say. When it comes down to the hard decisions, they don't really follow. Jesus says that he's the only way to Christ. Jesus said he's the only way to God in John 14:6. Jesus said a whole lot of other things that sometimes we just don't feel like doing. But most people do respect Jesus. They look at him as a really good guy. Jesus called him out, and here's how he does it. Jesus exposed this man for what he was, someone who likes Jesus but wasn't willing to obey him as God. He says in verse 19, "But to answer your question, you know the commandments. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely. You must not cheat anyone. Honor your father and your mother." And all these commandments, they're the second half, basically the second half of the 10 Commandments. These are things that all the Jews would be very familiar with. These are the things that Jews followed so closely. It's the fourth commandment, honor the Sabbath day and treat it as holy, that basically got Jesus crucified. That was when he healed a man on the Sabbath day, that was when the Sadducees and Pharisees wanted to actually kill him. They started plotting to take his life. These guys were all about the 10 Commandments. He knew the man's heart. He knew the man treasured these laws. He knew exactly what was going on there. He knew this guy had thought that if he was good enough, that he'd go to heaven. And that's how Jesus responded in verse 20. Or that's how the guy responded. He says, "Teacher, I've obeyed all these commandments since I was young." So the guy says, "Hey, look at me. I've obeyed all these commandments since I was little." He grew up in church. He knows what to do. He knows all the things that you're supposed to do, the things that you don't do. He probably puffed his chest out a little bit. He's full of pride. Look at what I've done. And this is good. He was a good person. Using good loosely. He was probably gentle. He didn't hurt people. He was faithful, honest, and respectful. And in many ways, we would look at him and say, you know what? That's a good guy. He probably shouldn't go to hell. He's better than most people that are out there. He hasn't really caused a lot of damage to others, which is how we often talk about goodness today, if you've noticed. I haven't heard other people. But let's take a look at Jesus' response. And this is amazing how Jesus responds to him. It says, looking at the man, Jesus felt genuine love for him. There is still one thing that you have not done. Go sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. I think it's really important to stop and think about this. Jesus could have responded to him in many different ways. He could have called him out as a hypocrite. He could have been angry. And there's plenty of instances of Jesus responding in anger and calling people out. But Jesus had genuine love for him. Now what's weird is, you wouldn't think that if Jesus had genuine love for him, he would ask him such a hard thing. I mean, who here wants to hear from Jesus, hey, sell everything that you have, come follow me, you have to give it all up? I mean, no one really wants to hear that. I certainly don't. I like my stuff. I like my comfort zone. But yet, Jesus calls him to give up everything that he owned, follow him, and be a homeless guy. Now, you can probably imagine the guy's not very impressed with this. In verse 22, it says, "At this the man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many, many possessions." And so if you've heard the expression "the man's face fell," just think about the many different instances where you've just been crushed. If your team loses, if that crush you've had for a long time totally flat out rejects you, it hurts, it stings. We don't make the cut, we don't make the grade, we don't get into the college we want to get into. There are these feelings that hurt so badly. This is the feeling the man had at this answer. He knew he could not do what Jesus wanted of him. He knew Jesus had tagged him right where he was. This man had too much to lose. It was the comfort, the security, the respect, and all the happiness that stuff can bring. Jesus asked the man to do something he knew he could not do, to prove to the young man he was in violation of the first 2 commandments. No one would do these things for someone who's just a good teacher. His stuff was his God, which is the first commandment. You're to have no other gods besides me. And the second commandment is have no other idols. And this man was breaking both of them. Because given the chance to follow Jesus or follow stuff, he chose stuff. And that's a tragic mistake. So here's a question. How crazy does that sound? Pretty crazy, right? Give up all the stuff that you have. Follow me. But here's another question. Where's this guy now? You want to answer that question? Where is this guy now? Where do you think he might be? Hell? Yeah. We don't really know, and I hope and I pray it'd be awesome if this guy had a change of heart and he followed Jesus when he saw that he rose at the end from the grave. But we don't know. He could be in heaven, he could be in hell. It all depends on whether or not he chose to give up his stuff and follow Jesus. What we do know is this guy's dead, okay? He's done. Second question, where's this guy's stuff? You can answer that. Where's his stuff? Any ideas? What?
Maybe in a museum.
In a museum, possibly. Could be in an artifact hanging up in a glass case somewhere. Where else might it be? Where it used to be? You know, it's probably disintegrated. Someone else got it. It rotted away. It's gone. And so when you look at the decision that he made, he traded the eternal significance of following Christ. In return, he got death, and everything that he owned is gone. Does not sound like a very good deal to me right now. When we look at it now, we think this guy was crazy not to follow Jesus. You see that? At first, when you see what Jesus asked him to do, you're like, man, that's crazy. But now when you look back, you're like, man, I hope that he followed Christ because everything we have is going away. The point in all this, life is short. Everything that we have is passing away, and it's going. I heard a great quote from Howard Hendricks the other day. If you know Howard Hendricks or have heard of Howard Hendricks, he's a legend at DTS. He mentored and discipled hundreds and thousands of amazing theologians who are awesome, who I respect a lot. But he said, you will never get serious about discipleship until you come to grips with the mortality of your life. Until we recognize and realize that life is short, we can't put it into perspective. It's about knowing Christ and making disciples. And when we have it in perspective, then we start making the right decisions, the decisions that are eternal. Right now, we in this room have the same decision to make that the young man made. We can follow Jesus. We can make him the ruler of our lives. We can follow him wherever he might lead. Or we can fall in love with our stuff and keep our stuff. And this is not like a guilty thing. This is do you want to live Or do you want to experience fun for a while that perishes, dies, and rots away? I want my life to have meaning, and I don't care what it costs. At least that's the attitude I want to have. God doesn't call us to give up all our stuff, but He calls us to surrender all our stuff. And here's the difference. When you give your stuff away, that's actually giving it away. But when you surrender it, you're saying, you know what, God? That's my 60-inch plasma LG TV, and it's yours. If someone breaks in and steals it, I'm not going to get too upset because you got my life in your hands, and it's all right. There's other things as well that we need to put in God's hands. There's relationships. Man, relationships are so tricky. There's guy-girl relationships, there's friends, there's all kinds of things that we want to hold on to, we think is going to be significant in our lives. And we still struggle with it as you get older. Because you want people to respect you and look up to you, and it doesn't happen as often as we want. Some of us have an opportunity to release these relationships to God, to surrender them, to make things right, to forgive others. For us tonight, God might be asking you to forgive somebody for a wound that they've given you. And Jesus says that He forgives you in the same manner that you forgive other people. And so if we're not forgiving each other, then that's blocking us from God. For some people, our stuff is our God, and we need to just not have to have the newest iPhone or the newest whatever. Maybe some of us need to give a little bit, be generous. I know I do. The bottom line is we have a simple decision to make. Are we going to have an eternal impact on earth, or are we going to follow other things? The decision that the rich young ruler made was tragic, and he's now dead and gone. Will the decision that you make, will it be a tragic decision? Will it be a short-sighted decision? Or will you follow Him with all your heart? I want to switch gears up for a little second here. Katie, if you could go ahead and start handing these things out. When we were in Honduras, we found these nifty little bracelets, and they're blue and white, and they're awesome. In Honduras, blue and white's everywhere, and it's really cool. I'm making a pledge by wearing this bracelet that my desire is to put God first. I'm going to fail at that, but this is a constant reminder. We face a decision every single day. Are we going to make this day about God, or are we going to kind of do it our own way? And so my encouragement is that if you take one of these bracelets, wear it, and every time you see it, think about this. Think about, I want to follow God. I want to put Him first. And no matter where He takes me, maybe even Honduras, I want to go wherever He leads and live on the adventure that God has called me to. So, as these kind of come around, think about one thing you need to do to follow Jesus. One thing you need to give up. One thing that's hindering you from the walk. Maybe if you're in here, you've never accepted Christ. This is the most important decision you will ever make, because this is a time when you tell Jesus, "Hey, I can't do it. I need you. I want to follow you." Some people here might not have been baptized. Baptism is an important public profession of an inward faith. It's making public, my desire is to follow Christ wherever He leads. And so those are a couple big decisions. If there's anything else, write it down on the card in the middle of the table. And if we go ahead and launch this video, and as this video is playing, think about what you need to do to follow Jesus. And go ahead and try one of the bracelets on and pray that it'll make a difference in your life.